Thanks again for joining me. I wanted to apologize for this sound of rushing wind that is going on in my videos. It's the ventilation system for my workshop, and the toxicum venium would fill the room and my videos would no longer exist, or at least I wouldn't anyways. So I apologize. I did put some aluminum foil under my phone, so hopefully it'll direct my voice a little better towards the microphone and pick up a little bit less of the wind blowing by. Proper ventilation is vital to surviving the process of alchemy, and because all chemical reactions off-gas something, or most do anyways, and that off-gassing is oftentimes noxious. It's not something that you would want to breathe or inhale. Thinking about the work in science and how it all ties together, because this isn't alchemy and science don't contradict each other, they fulfill each other. The parts of science that modern science doesn't understand is explained in the process of alchemy. You have to think of modern science in terms of age as like maybe a 3 or 4 year old kid, a toddler. A toddler at that age runs around the yard exploring everything. They want to investigate everything, and so they take everything in the yard apart. Whatever it is, if it can be taken apart, they'll take it apart because they want to see what's inside. How does it work? And so that's modern science today, is at the stage of taking everything apart to figure out how it works. Not realizing or understanding how things come together. And so they take it apart, and then it's apart. It can never be put back together again. The thing is dead. And so then they analyze that thing while it's dead, and they declare, what it consists of. But before they examined it, they first nullified its life force. And so they're not examining the thing in its wholeness. Modern science is a science of taking things apart. Very little of it involves putting things together, and they don't understand how things come together. Even the most simple of products, such as ammonia. Ammonia consists of the particles that are in the atmosphere being bound together. And so there should be an abundance of ammonia everywhere because it's made of the atmosphere. And nature seems to be able to produce ammonia in our bodies and in the earth at low temperatures and low pressures and without any difficulty. But modern science produces ammonia under extreme temperatures and extreme pressures. It forces the things together. And by forcing these things together in such a manner, it wastes, it uses up a tremendous amount of energy, and the byproduct of that waste is more CO2, of course. And modern science will readily admit to you that nature has a better way of doing it. But they don't know how that better way works. And so we continue. Ammonia is it's the #1 export in the world. If we stop producing ammonia, then 70% of the world would die from starvation, because it's what fertilizer is made out of. And yet our methods of producing it don't even come close to the efficiency of the ways that the earth produces it. And so we continue to just spin our wheels, forcing things together. Nature doesn't force anything ever. Nature attracts things together. Nature creates an environment where two opposing forces want to come together. And so it creates ammonia in our bodies at 96 degrees Celsius or Fahrenheit and very, very low pressures. Very low pressures in atmosphere, maybe too. And we have our methods that are working against the natural flow of things. The process itself mimics the natural behavior of the substances within the earth as they go through the cyclic processes of the volcano in the belly of the earth. As the belt is like a conveyor belt of salts from the lower plate dive down into the subjunction zones, those salts meet with the solutions underground, and most that sulfur is your number one element down in there. If you ever visited a volcano, everything smells like rotten eggs. And so as these salts are added into this sulfurous soup underground, it creates distillates. More volatile elements are born, and they immediately leave this high temperature solution, and they get pushed up under pressure from the subjunction zones into these cracks that lead up to the surface. And along the way, as it's being pushed up by the pressure and heat of deep underground, these solutions find places where it starts to cool, and then they condense. And pockets will be made of different solutions that were born under extreme heat and pressure as the salts were introduced to the sulfurs. Then you have these pockets of different solutions trapped, sealed under pressure just at the transitional point between where the heat is no longer hot enough to push it to the surface, but still hot enough for it to be acted upon. And so you're in a temperature range between body temperature and the melting point of lead, essentially, just above the melting point of lead. In these pools, because the salts already contained all the elements already, but the ocean salts contain every element. If you ever done an extraction on Dead Sea salt, you'll see that the amount of minerals in there is substantial. And so these salts are born into spirits, and those spirits carry with it these minerals, and the process begins. The element is dissolved. It's mortified. And then the long night, dark night of the soul begins as it ferments in this chaotic primordial soup of nature, containing within it all the potential for any element, is brewing underground in these chambers. And then at some point, the wall of one chamber will collapse, and it will pour into the chamber alongside of it, and those two solutions, one could be a base solution, one could be an acid solution, and when those two solutions come together, there's a reaction. And that reaction is the battle of the dissimilar elements. But every time there's a reaction, both things present in the reaction will be changed forever. And so it reconfigures, it starts building upon the dissolved elements, using those dissolved elements as a building block, a nucleus of a new atom. And it builds and grows and develops new life around this, because the original substance already contains the essence of life. And because that essence in there, they call it the intrinsic fire in the substance. It exists in the substance because that's how it was born. And so you can build onto that pre-existing substance because the structure is already there. But when you build onto it, how you build onto it, the temperatures and pressures, at the depth at which that happens will determine what elements are born. And these elements, there's essentially two branches. If you're following the philosophic model, you have elements that are hydrated. Some would say long ago that it had humors inside of it. And then the other elements are dehydrated. Softer metals, such as silver, tin, mercury, are hydrated metals, and mercury being the most hydrated of the metals. And then you have indium and tin, all these metals that are really soft. They have a higher level of water contained with them, hydrates. And then the other metals, the harder metals, iron, copper, gold, those are more dehydrated. And as they're, like gold is an oxide compared to mercury is a hydrate. And the way that this happens is it's either born under pressure or it goes through a period where the pressure is released, and the loss of pressure together with the intense heat causes the hydrates to leave. The hydrogen, it's a hydrate, so it's an H2O molecule bound to the element. And when the temperature goes up, the hydrogen, has less of a bond, and so it leaves at a lower temperature than the oxygen will. And so as the temperature increases, the amount of hydrogen left in the stone or in the element is reduced greater and greater and greater until finally it reaches a point where the hydrogen's gone, it's just an oxide. And if you go past that temperature still, you'll lose the oxygen. And so this work happens in the range of temperatures where you're working within the range where the oxygen will remain. But depending on the desired element, you will either put it under pressure and increase the amount of hydrogen in the element, or you'll remove the pressure and you'll decrease the amount of hydrogen in the element. And Paracelsus calls this the humors of the substance. And so if I want silver, I have to add humors, add hydrates into the lead. But if I want gold, I have to first add the hydrates and then remove the hydrogen and leave the oxygen behind, so it becomes an oxide. And so it goes through this process. First, it becomes female, as in hydrated. It's a feminine substance. And then it becomes male. Just like every embryo, before the cells have taken a direction, it starts out female. Everybody in the universe that's ever been born started out female, and then there's a point of augmentation where it becomes male. And so the same thing with this process. The element starts out female. It's hydrated to begin with to make the nucleus that you're building. And then as you continue forward, you can either dehydrate or continue to hydrate that thing. And if you dry it all the way out, completely dry, then you're in the range of gold. But if you wet it all the way down as far as it can hold, as much water as it can hold, then you're in the range of mercury. The Paracelsus, he got a bad rap. He was a very well-known adept, and where he got it wrong was in his application of as above, so below. He tried to explain phenomenon that were happening outside of our atmosphere, such as shooting stars and other things, using what he'd witnessed in this work. And so he got that part wrong because he was over applying the as above, so below. He wasn't seeing it from as big a picture, but he was correct in understanding how the metals and elements are born. And so I find it disappointing that they kind of threw the baby out with the bathwater, so to speak, in his case, because he actually has a tremendous amount to offer. And just because he was wrong on a couple of on like one aspect of what he was trying to explain doesn't mean that he was wrong about everything. And so the humors, what I've witnessed, is exactly what he says. It's all about balancing the humors in the substance. And so you can either add humors in or you can remove the humors. And they're visible when they're going in. All the moisture, instead of rising out of the solution, is going into the solution. It's pretty obvious. And then when you take off the pressure, then the humors leave, and it dehydrates, changes the shape of the crystal. The misunderstanding of what this process is pretty extreme for the most part. Because the products are reputed to have so many fantastical properties, people can't comprehend how one substance could do so many things. And in reality, there's many different substances that are the products of the work that are used in different ways, and the conjunction of those substances is what was used to make the final medicine. And that's where the misunderstanding is. The powder of projection is one part of the medicine, and you have to have both powders of projection, both the white and the red, in order to make the final product. And the final product doesn't project, according to Fulcanelli. The medicine is just that. It's medicine. And its projective powers are in your body and not in the metals, as the projection powder by itself works. And so you have to have the projection powder, the red, and you have to have the projection powder, the white. And then you use the art to join them together into one crystal, and that's the medicine. It's although the powder of projection itself can be used as a medicine, it's not the medicine. It's not the magnum opus. It's one step towards achieving that. And the way that they describe that is the hieroglyph. There is a man holding the horn of Amalthea, and on the left side of the hieroglyph you see the mirror, and in the mirror you see Mother Nature's face being revealed, and then he holds the basket, and then to your right, to his left, is the tree of life. And so what they say is, as Mother Nature reveals herself to you, the horn of plenty is discovered on your way to finding the tree of life. And it's a signpost along the way that you're going in the right direction, because that's the test. Before you can make the medicine, you test to see if you're making the right product by seeing if the product you made will turn lead into gold or silver. And if it does, then you go forward and you make the next step in the process. And it's because these things are often called under similar names or even by the same name, with minor changes just to indicate the differences. And so it appears to be the same substance. But what it really is the substance itself actually has 3 components. And so you have to create the 3 components, and then from that point, once you've done the first projection, then you know that you've gone in the right direction to make the magnum opus. And so it's a long journey. Just because you have the powder of projection does not mean that you've finished the work yet. And if you're beginning to understand the work at all, you'll realize that you could live 1,000 years and never accomplish all the things that you could do with the work. Modern science, because when they think of how an atom is born, they imagine that it was born in the form that it resides in now. And that form is extremely stable. That form cannot be changed without being acted upon with a greater force. And so they assume that every atom had to be born in like a supernova or something like that in order for it to happen. But the misunderstanding is that Mother Nature doesn't build atoms as atoms. Mother Nature builds a large single cell version of what it desires. And then through a process identical to how a cell in an egg divides and multiplies, it's multiplying as it divides. And every divided part is identical to the original, with the exception of how it was augmented by the seed, if the seed was male or female. And so the cell will be bent in that direction, determined by the seed. And so in alchemy, if you're making the white product or the red product, they are male and female. And so you have a different seed. You have different food for the different stones. One is being dehydrated, one is being hydrated. This journey is unlike any other journey possible, and it's the greatest journey known to man. And that's why there's so many incredibly amazing stories written on the subject. The Holy Grail, the Golden Fleece, Hercules. It just goes on and on and on. You couldn't name them all in an hour. But it's told, Fulcanelli quotes, that anybody has the option of trying for himself to find the Golden Fleece. And it's something that's available to every person, should they choose. And so I kind of figure, why not? I'm going to be hanging around anyways. Why not embark on the greatest adventure known to man and see where it takes me, And well, thanks for joining me. I will post more as I think about things. Alchemy is not a spectator sport. And Fulcanelli, when he's writing his book, and if you're intending on understanding it, then he expects you to be experimenting with what you're learning, because there's no other way to understand what he's talking about, because he's describing behavior in solutions, and you have to look for that behavior to know if you're working with the right solution, And so he gives you a lot of clues to point you in the direction of discovery, and it's there to be discovered if that is something that interests you. But like I said, it's going to take every ounce of your being bent towards uncovering that truth. Every part of your will has to be bent in that direction, or it's just not going to happen, because it's one of the most difficult riddles ever made. And so if you enjoy a game of riddles, then Fulcanelli is really going to be the one for you. May you be blessed.